On January 1970, there was a fatal accident involving a plane that crashed in the middle of a snowstorm. But this story is not about that plane crash. The story is about something way crazier. It's about when the sky froze solid and hundreds of people were trapped in an ice cube. The year was 1970, and the place was the remote Siberian wilderness. The plane was carrying 24 passengers and 6 crew members from Irkutsk to Yakutsk, Russia. As it made its way over the desolate icy landscape, it flew into a massive snowstorm. Soon, the plane was buffeted by winds of up to 80 miles per hour, and visibility dropped to 0. Then suddenly the engine sputtered and died. They had sucked in so much snow that they had frozen. It was obvious that the plane was going down. With no other options, the pilot set the plane on a course for a safe landing. But just as he thought he had found a clearing, he realized that it too was covered in snow. He tried again and again, but everywhere he looked, there was only white. With the fuel running out, the pilot knew that this was the end. And then he saw a break in the clouds below him, and he aimed for it. Just before impact, everyone on board buckled their seatbelts and braced for the inevitable. But when the plane hit the ground, miraculously, it didn't explode or burst into flames. Instead, it seemed like time had stopped. There was silence all around. The wind had died down, and the snow had stopped falling. Everyone on board slowly unbuckled their seatbelts and emerged from the wreckage. To their astonishment, they soon realized that they were not in a clearing after all. They had landed in the middle of an ice cube. They soon realized that the plane had flown into a giant cloud of supercooled water droplets that had frozen on impact with the ground. When the plane had been buffeted by the storm, it must have lost all of its heat. And when it hit the ground, the supercooled water droplets had instantly frozen, turning the world around them into a solid sheet of ice. They were trapped in what was essentially a gigantic freezer. At first, the passengers and crew were elated. They had survived a plane crash in one of the harshest environments on Earth. But their joy was short-lived, because now they had to survive the night in sub-zero temperatures with little more than the clothes on their backs. One passenger recalled, "It was scary. We unfastened our seatbelts and couldn't understand why the door wouldn't open. We shouted, but our voices were muffled and could not be heard above the howling wind. As the temperature dropped, the passengers huddled together for warmth. Some cried, others prayed. But everyone knew that their chances of survival were slim. However, after some time, they started to calm down and think clearly for the first time. Now, they had to come up with a plan to escape before it was too late. One of the passengers, who happened to be a doctor, told the others to drink some whiskey and eat some chocolate bars that were on board. He said that this would raise their blood alcohol levels, which would help keep them warm. Then he helped the others break the windows and make a hole in the fuselage. They crawled through the hole and collapsed on the snow. Miraculously, they were alive, but they were in grave danger. They were freezing, and it was only a matter of time before hypothermia kicked in. But then something unexpected happened. A helicopter soon appeared in the distance. It was there to search for survivors of the plane crash. But when it saw the huge ice cube, it assumed that there were no survivors, so it was about to fly away. However, one of the passengers had a brilliant idea. He took off his fur hat and waved it frantically, hoping to get the pilot's attention. It worked. The helicopter circled back, and soon the passengers were aboard. They were taken to a nearby village where they could get warm and receive medical treatment. But what about the ice cube? What had caused it to form in the first place? Well, it all has to do with the unique conditions that can occur in the atmosphere. Sometimes water vapor in the atmosphere can reach the upper levels where temperatures are extremely low. The vapor condenses into tiny water droplets, which then freeze into solid particles. These particles can then collide with other water droplets, which also freeze, and they form large aggregates that we know as clouds. However, sometimes these clouds are supercooled, meaning that the water droplets are below freezing point, but they haven't yet turned into ice crystals. If the temperature inside a supercooled cloud is suddenly lowered, the water droplets will rapidly freeze onto whatever they come into contact with. In this case, the plane was flying through a supercooled cloud, and the water droplets froze on impact, creating the giant ice cube. Passengers and crew were lucky to have survived the crash, but they were even luckier to have been trapped in the ice cube. You see, the ice cube had insulated them and kept them from freezing. If they had been left out in the open, they would have likely died from hypothermia within minutes. But as it was, They were able to huddle together and wait for rescue, which eventually came. This incredible story happened on New Year's Eve in 1970, and as you might imagine, there were celebrations all around the world to mark the occasion. People were drinking, partying, and celebrating the new year, and in many places there were fireworks displays to mark the occasion. But one display was more spectacular than all the rest. It was happening high above the Arctic Circle, where Santa Claus was getting ready for his busiest night of the year. But Santa was in trouble. His sleigh had been damaged in a recent storm, and he needed to get it fixed fast, if he was going to make it around the world in time. But he was worried that his reindeer would start to wonder what was taking him so long. And if they got impatient, they might bolt, and then his Christmas delivery plans would be ruined. So he called in the cavalry, and soon an elite team of elves arrived to help him repair his sleigh. But they soon realized that it would take more than just duct tape and a prayer to get it fixed. They needed parts from the North Pole, but Santa couldn't leave his post, and the elves weren't about to abandon him. So they did the next best thing. They contacted Santa's secret reserve of backup Santas. And soon a new team of jolly old men was arriving at the North Pole in hot air balloons. But they were in for a surprise. The North Pole wasn't exactly what they expected. In fact, it was a hive of activity. Elves were rushing around loading crates onto planes. Reindeer were stampeding through the streets, and Santa was barking orders at everyone. The backup Santas were quickly briefed, and then they were sent out to cover Santa's routes. Each balloon could carry enough presents for several million children. And each backup Santa was equipped with a state-of-the-art GPS system to ensure that he delivered the presents to the right house. As the sun began to set, the backup Santas took off. And as the last of the hot air balloons disappeared over the horizon, the real Santa emerged from his workshop. His sleigh was repaired, and he was ready to deliver presents to the children of the world. But he knew that he owed the backup Santas a debt of gratitude. Without them, Christmas would have been canceled. And so it was that on that snowy Christmas Eve, Santa Claus and his army of elves and backup Santas brought joy to millions of children around the world. They may not have been able to save the plane or the people on board, but they could bring a little bit of Christmas magic to those who needed it most.